Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a topic you sent in, something that I think we can all relate to.
Yeah.
It's about finding a sense of peace and fulfillment.
Right.
You know, like an oasis in the middle of a crazy, chaotic world.
Yeah.
We've got your source material right here, and it's all about finding that true north in our lives, that feeling of being truly home.
And you're spot on with that oasis image.
Mm.
What's fascinating is how this source connects that longing for peace with the idea of returning to our roots, specifically returning to Jesus.
Okay, so returning to our roots, it's interesting. But what does that even mean in today's world? Like, we're not all suddenly becoming farmers or anything.
Right.
What's the deal with this returning idea?
It's a powerful metaphor, isn't it?
Mm.
Think about it. When we feel lost or uncertain, there's something grounding about remembering where we came from.
Mm.
In this case, the source points to our spiritual roots, our connection with Jesus.
Got it. So less about literal roots and more about reconnecting with something deeper.
Precisely.
Okay.
And the source digs into two big ways to do just that. Embracing Jesus and letting go of this I can do it all myself mentality.
Okay.
Which, let's be honest, is something I struggle with all the time.
Ha.
That constant pressure to have it all together is exhausting.
Tell me about it. Social media alone is like a masterclass in self-sufficiency, right?
Right.
But I'm curious, the source specifically talks about finding rest in Jesus.
Yeah.
What does that even mean? Is it like taking a nap? Because sign me up for that kind of spiritual practice.
I wish it were that simple.
Uh-huh.
But there's a beautiful passage in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30, where Jesus talks about offering rest for our souls.
Okay.
And it's not about physical rest, but about finding a sense of peace and release from the burdens we carry.
Okay, so less about napping and more about easing those worries we all lug around.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like imagine you've been hiking through the wilderness with a heavy backpack. Your shoulders ache, you're tired, and every step feels like a chore. Yeah. That's what it's like to carry around anxieties, fears, and pressures.
Wow, that image really resonates.
Yeah.
We've all been there, right? Feeling the weight of the world on our shoulders.
And in that moment, what you crave most is to take off that heavy pack and just breathe. That's the kind of rest Jesus offers, a release from those burdens.
So it's like he's offering to carry that weight for us.
Exactly.
Wow.
The source even compares Jesus to a shepherd guiding and protecting his sheep.
There's something so comforting about that image, isn't there?
Yeah.
Knowing that we're not alone in those challenging moments. That there's another verse that really jumped out at me.
Okay.
It's from the Gospel of Luke chapter 15. You know, the story of the prodigal son.
Oh, yes. A classic story of rebellion, redemption, and that incredible moment of coming home.
Right. And the source uses this analogy to illustrate what it means to return to Jesus.
Right.
Like the son who squandered his inheritance and hit rock bottom, sometimes we wander away from our faith, searching for fulfillment in all the wrong places. And just like that loving father who welcomed his son back with open arms, the source reminds us that God's love is always there, waiting for us to turn back to him.
There's something so powerful about that unconditional love.
Yeah.
That no matter how far we stray, we're always welcome back.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder that we're not defined by our mistakes.
Absolutely. And that's a perfect segue into the second big idea from your source, dishing the self-sufficiency myth.
Okay, let's unpack that. What exactly does this source say about self-sufficiency?
Okay.
Because honestly, that whole I've got this attitude is so ingrained these days.
It is. It's everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah.
This idea that we have to project this image of effortless perfection in our careers, our relationships, even our Instagram feeds.
It's exhausting.
It is exhausting.
But this source suggests that this whole I've got this mentality isn't just tiring, it's actually counterproductive.
Right.
It's like we're so busy trying to prove ourselves that we miss out on experiencing true strength. That's such a great point. The source argues that true strength comes not from denying our limitations, but from acknowledging them and relying on something greater than ourselves.
So it's about surrendering the need to control everything.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that can be scary, right?
Yeah.
Letting go of the reins and trusting that things will work out, even if we're not the ones orchestrating every detail.
Talk about a crisis of faith for a control freak like me.
Right.
But I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
Yeah.
Practically speaking, what does it look like to let go of self-sufficiency and rely on, well, something else?
Well, the source points to a few key practices.
Okay.
One is prayer,
Okay.
Not just rattling off a wish list, but engaging in honest, heartfelt conversation with God,
Right.
sharing our fears, our hopes, even our doubts.
So it's about being vulnerable, admitting that we don't have all the answers.
Yes, and recognizing that there's someone who does. The source also talks about finding strength and wisdom in the Bible.
All right.
It's like a compass pointing us in the right direction when we feel lost.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people, myself included, try to muscle through life on their own.
Right.
And then we wonder why we feel so drained and depleted.
It's like trying to run a marathon without ever stopping to refuel or hydrate.
Yeah.
You might be able to keep going for a while, but eventually you're going to hit a wall.
So how do we prevent that? How do we tap into that deeper source of strength that the source keeps talking about?
Well, the source emphasizes the importance of recognizing our need for God's grace.
Okay.
And grace, it's not about earning God's favor or checking off boxes,
Right.
but about accepting his unconditional love and forgiveness even when we mess up.
Which we all do.
Yeah.
So it's like this constant process of returning to that source of love and grace, especially when we stumble or fall short.
Exactly.
Okay.
There's a verse from Isaiah chapter 55, verse 7 that beautifully captures this idea.
Okay.
Let the wicked forsake their ways and the unrighteous their thoughts. Let them turn to the Lord, and he will have mercy on them, and to our God, for he will freely pardon.
Wow.
It's a reminder that no matter what we've done, no matter how far we've strayed, we can always turn back to God and receive his forgiveness.
That's incredibly reassuring. It's like
Yeah.
no matter how lost we might feel, there's always a path back.
And this path, it's not about striving for perfection, but about embracing the journey.
Okay.
It's about learning to walk with Jesus through the highs and lows, the victories and the setbacks, knowing that he's with us every step of the way.
You mentioned setbacks.
Yeah.
What about those times when we feel overwhelmed, like we're drowning in doubt or fear?
Yeah.
This source also touches on those darker moments, right?
Absolutely. The source reminds us that even in those moments of weakness, when we feel like we're at our wits' end, God's power is still at work.
There's that wilderness analogy again. It's like even in those barren, desolate places, there's still beauty to be found, a sense of God's presence. But how do we hold on to that hope when things feel bleak?
The source quotes the Apostle Paul, who knew a thing or two about facing hardship.
Right.
In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul talks about how God's power is made perfect in our weakness. It's like when we're willing to admit we can't do it all on our own, that's when God's strength can truly shine through.
That's a powerful reminder.
Yeah.
It's like we're being invited to let go of our need to control everything and to simply rest in God's love and grace, trusting that he's working everything out for our good.
Right.
But how does that actually play out in our day-to-day lives?
It's about making choices that reflect that trust. It's about choosing faith over fear, gratitude over grumbling, and forgiveness over bitterness.
Okay.
It's about showing up each day ready to follow wherever he leads, even when we don't have all the answers.
It's a daily surrender, isn't it? Letting go of our own limited perspective and embracing God's bigger plan.
Exactly. And that takes practice.
Right.
It takes cultivating habits that keep us grounded in our faith.
Right.
Like we talked about earlier, spending time in prayer, reading the Bible, and seeking out community with other believers.
Right.
These are all ways to strengthen our connection with God and to draw on his strength when our own reserves run dry.
So it's not about becoming superhuman or having all the answers, but about staying connected to the source of true strength.
Precisely. Just like a branch needs to stay connected to the vine to bear fruit, we need to stay connected to Jesus to experience true peace, joy, and fulfillment. And the beautiful thing is that connection is always available to us.
There's something incredibly freeing about that isn't there.
Yeah.
Knowing that no matter what mistakes we've made, no matter how far we've strayed, we can always return to that source of love and grace.
And that's the heart of this whole deep dive, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about rediscovering that sense of belonging, that deep sense of peace and satisfaction that comes from knowing we're loved unconditionally and guided by a power greater than ourselves.
It's like that oasis in the wilderness we talked about at the beginning, a
Right.
place of refuge and replenishment.
But instead of being a physical location, it's something we carry within us,
Right.
that connection with Jesus that sustains us through life's journey.
Beautifully said. And it's a journey worth taking, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious, is there anything specific in the source material that stood out to you?
One thing that really struck me was the emphasis on finding true satisfaction in our relationship with Jesus,
Okay.
not in worldly pursuits or achievements.
Oh, that's good. It's like we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us that happiness is found in external things.
Right.
Possessions, status, success.
Yeah.
But this source points to a much deeper, more lasting source of fulfillment.
Exactly. It's about shifting our focus from what the world values to what truly matters, our relationship with God.
Hmm.
And the amazing thing is that kind of satisfaction, it's not dependent on our circumstances or our emotions.
Right.
It's something much deeper and more enduring. It's a peace that transcends understanding, a joy that runs deeper than any temporary high.
Exactly. And it's available to all of us, regardless of our past mistakes or current struggles.
This has been such an insightful conversation.
It has.
It's like we've peeled back the layers of what it means to truly find rest and fulfillment in a world that often feels like anything but.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what I find really interesting? This whole idea of returning to Jesus and letting go of self-sufficiency, it's not just about some abstract spiritual concept.
Right.
It's about finding a different way to live,
Mm-hmm.
a different way to move through the world.
Right.
It's about trading in that constant striving for a deep, abiding peace.
You've hit the nail on the head. The source even uses the phrase, exchanging our burdens for his yoke. And it quotes Matthew 11.29.
Okay.
Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. It's like trading in a heavy, cumbersome pack for one that fits perfectly, one that's designed to carry the weight.
That's such a powerful image.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about all the ways we try to navigate life's challenges on our own strength, relying on our own limited wisdom.
And often ending up feeling exhausted and defeated.
Right.
The source reminds us that we're not meant to carry those burdens alone.
Mm.
We have a Savior who not only offers to share the load, but who also promises to guide us with wisdom and grace.
Mm.
It reminds me of Proverbs 3.5-6.
Okay.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding in all your ways. Submit to him, and he will make your paths straight.
So it's not about having it all figured out,
Right.
but about surrendering our need for control and trusting in a power greater than ourselves.
Precisely.
Wow.
And that kind of surrender, it's not a sign of weakness, but of incredible strength.
Mm.
It's about recognizing our limitations and embracing the freedom that comes from letting go.
It's like that moment when you finally stop trying to swim against the current and allow yourself to be carried by the water.
Yeah.
There's a sense of release, of peace that comes from surrendering to something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. And in that surrender, we find not only rest, but also a deeper sense of purpose. We discover that our lives are not just about our own individual pursuits, but about something much grander, something that connects us to something eternal.
This deep dive has really challenged me to think differently about where I'm searching for satisfaction in my own life.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in the hustle and bustle, the constant striving for more, that we lose sight of what truly matters.
It's a constant temptation, isn't it?
It is.
But this source reminds us that true fulfillment isn't found in chasing after worldly things,
Yeah.
but in cultivating our relationship with Jesus.
Mm.
It's in those quiet moments of prayer, those times of reflection and connection, that we find the peace and contentment our hearts crave.
And that's ultimately what this deep dive has been all about, isn't it? It's about rediscovering the joy of returning to our roots, of finding solace in the one who offers rest for our weary souls.
Beautifully said. And it's a message that's just as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. No matter what challenges you're facing, no matter how lost or uncertain you might feel, remember that you are loved unconditionally, and there's always a path back to that place of peace and belonging.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we'll leave you with this final thought. What if true strength comes not from having it all together, but from knowing who to lean on when things fall apart? Until next time, keep diving deeper.